Yohanan, good morning.
Hi, Dan.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah, nice to be here with you.
Last time we met, we started a series in the book of Deuteronomy. We had something of an introduction to the book. We divided it into its main parts as we saw it, and we brought out just a few of its themes. And we also spoke of the twist that came at the end. Today, I want us to go back to its first part, its early chapters, and look at one of the main themes that seems to come up there. As I look at chapter 4, there are a few verses that jump up.
That's the chapter that starts now, O Israel, right?
Yes, at the time, in our previous episode, we mentioned that as a pivot in Moses' tone towards the people.
Because the now comes after 3 chapters of relating to what happened before that.
Yes. Yeah. He spoke of what happened in the past, and then he reminded them what they ought to do in light of all of that. In chapter 4, that started that way, listen to verse 9. And listen to this warning. It's more than an exhortation, it's an admonishment. Only be careful, he said to them, and watch yourselves closely, so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen, or let them fade from your heart, as long as you live. Teach them, he adds, to your children and to their children after them. Do not forget what your eyes have seen, and teach them to your children and your grandkids. In verse 23, he adds another warning. Be careful, he says to the generation that is about to enter the land. Be careful not to forget. Not to forget, what is it this time? The covenant. The covenant of the Lord your God that he made with you. Do not make for yourselves an idol in the form of anything the Lord your God has forbidden. For the next 7 verses or so, he warns them that when they do enter the land and they do make idols and worship false gods, God will disperse them amongst the nations until this idol worship they will get so tired with it, and then they will call on God. And then in verse 31, he says, for the Lord your God is merciful. He will hear their call because he is merciful. He is a merciful God. He will not abandon or destroy you or forget the covenant with your ancestors, which he confirmed to them by oath. 3 times in one chapter, we have Moses admonishing the people not to forget, or rather he admonishes them twice not to forget, not the things that they have seen, nor the covenant that they have made with the Lord. And then finally he tells them the Lord himself will not forget.
Right. And he will not forget his covenant, right, to your fathers.
Right. Forgetting, chapter 4 is not the only place this verb appears, not to forget. And also the flip side of this verb is remember, naturally. Right. It's going to come up both in chapter 5 and in 6, 7, a lot more in chapter 8, and then in 9. An inordinate number of occurrences of these verbs. But in chapter 4, what is Moses talking about when he tells them not to forget the things that their eyes have seen? Ostensibly, he's speaking about all the past events that he just spoke about in chapters 1 through 3.
Yeah, and I think it's important here, as we're talking in English, we talked earlier in Hebrew, but that we really understand that this is first and foremost speaking to the people of Israel.
Yes.
And he's saying to them, he says in verse 7 of chapter 4 that you've been talking about just now, for what great nation is there that has a God so near to it as the Lord your God whenever we call on him? Mm-hmm. And Moses is talking specifically to God's work within the people of Israel at this point. And the covenant he's talking about is with your fathers, is talking about the covenant that he made with Israel.
This is a very important point for English listeners. To be even more specific, it's not just the people of Israel in general, but the second generation from the Exodus. Mm-hmm. The first generation failed to enter. This is the second generation at the edge of the promised land, and Moses is speaking to them, and through them also to the following generations of Israel. I think it is easy, especially in English, as you read through the Bible, to get the pronouns mixed up. Where in Hebrew it might speak of you all of you, as a group of people. In modern English, it often just says you. And the reader might, perhaps unwittingly, think that the text is speaking to him or to her personally.
Well, we can obviously learn from it, and maybe we'll talk about that towards the end. But like you say, that's principles that are learned from things that are being said specifically here to the people of Israel.
Yes. All right, fair enough. So what are the things that Israel must not forget? What were the things that they have seen in their eyes? Let me survey briefly chapters 1, 2, and 3. But we'll probably stop over this theme that starts coming up there. In chapter 1, as we've said in the previous episode, he starts out with the location, the time of the book, and then the monologue begins. And basically, the first thing that we get is this commandment that God gave the children of Israel at Sinai to get up and go to Canaan. Now, we know later, from a later passage, how short that journey could have been. It could have been just 11 days. From wherever Mount Sinai truly is.
That could have been the end of the story as far as the wanderings were concerned, right?
Leave Egypt, sit for 2 years at Sinai, receive a law, meet with God, and then
go up into the land.
Yeah, go inherit. However, what happens is, as they go, Moses divides up the people so he doesn't have to judge them himself. He appoints judges and officers, etc. And then they get to this place, and the people suggest they send spies. Moses agrees. He says it's a good idea. And so they send 12 spies, one man from each tribe, people of good reputation, and they go out and come back after 40 days. And after 40 days, in chapter, this is in chapter 2, this is still in chapter 1. And after 40 days, they bring back a report of the land. And the report, for the most part, is good. They speak of the land being a good land. They bring fruit from the land. The land that the Lord our God is giving us is good. However, in verse 26, Moses tells them, you would not go up, but you rebelled against the command of the Lord your God, and you complained in your tents and said, because the Lord hates us, he has brought us out of the land of Egypt to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites.
And just one note here, that is the total opposite of what we see as one of the main themes of this book of Deuteronomy, which is love.
Love.
The Lord's love.
The Lord's love.
And the people were saying, because the Lord hates us.
Yes. Yes, for God's hate, he brought us up to deliver us into the Amorites. And you said, where can we go up? And then Moses keeps quoting them. He says, our brethren, the spies, have discouraged our hearts, saying, listen to this, the people are greater and taller than we. The cities are great and fortified up to heaven. Moreover, we have seen the sons of the Anakim there. Mm-hmm. Anakim in Hebrew, we use this word in modern Hebrew to speak of giants,
right?
Which is really not far from what this is saying. The sons of the Anakim are the Nephilim, the giants. There is not only a great people, but a tall people. So I don't know, are these people as tall as the Swedes or the Norwegians or the Dutch? How tall are these people? Are they tall like average Texans, or are they much taller still?
Whatever they were, in the minds of Israel, and in the words of 10 of the spies who came back, they were tall enough to be an obstacle which they thought they couldn't get through.
Right. And basically they're saying two things. The people are too big for us, and their cities are too fortified. Mm-hmm. The fortifications reach up to the heavens, meaning the walls are so tall. If you haven't been to the Middle East and you don't know anything about Middle Eastern exaggeration, this can be your first intro. But exaggeration being as it may, they were afraid. And so this is really chapter 1. And from this point on, this is the pivotal point. He's recounting what happened in the previous book, in the book of Numbers. The people were so discouraged, they rebelled, and they did not believe in God. This is the same God who brought them out of Egypt with great wonders, with a mighty hand and outstretched arm, and struck the greatest nation on the face of the planet back then, and brought out a people from bondage into freedom. They saw it with their eyes. They saw all the plagues, all the strikes against Egypt, even the final one. It was incredible. And then walking through the Red Sea. How much more did they need to see to believe? And yet here they arrived at the edge of the promised land, and they did not believe, Moses says, in the Lord their God. And so he told them, the Lord made an oath saying that not one of that generation shall enter the land that he has promised. And he sent them wandering for the next 38 years until every one of them died.
And there is another stress here that in chapter 2, verse 7, and that the Lord was with them even in those wanderings.
Yeah.
He says, "For the Lord your God has blessed you in all that you have done. He has known your wanderings through this great wilderness. These 40 years the Lord your God has been with you. You have not lacked a thing."
That's right. So even in their rebellion, in their unfaithfulness, he remains faithful. Chapter 2 starts describing the wandering. Actually, not the wandering. The wandering is summarized, but then after those years of wandering, chapter 2 speaks of what happens next. And what happens next, after all those years, God told them, it's time for you to go up. And so wherever it was that they were wandering, probably around the northern regions of Saudi Arabia and the southern parts of the modern day Jordan, he tells them, go up to Mount Seir. That's the land of Esau, brother of Jacob. And most of this chapter is dedicated to their crossing the lands of Esau, Moab, and Ammon. All of these are relatives, one way or another, to Israel. Esau is the brother of Jacob. The Moabites and the Ammonites are cousins. These are the offspring of Lot, who was cousin to Abraham. And God, time and time again, tells them, you shall go quietly through their lands. Do not provoke them to war.
Because of the family relationship.
Because of the family relationship, you will offer them money for the water you take from their wells and for the food that you buy from them. But listen, he makes Moses, or whether it's Moses or a later editor, seems to make a couple of comments. So as they go through the land of Seir, he makes this comment in chapter 2, verse 10 through 12. Listen to this. In my New King James, they even put it in parentheses. It says this: the Emim people had dwelt there in times past. It was a people as great and numerous and tall as the Anakim.
And the Anakim were the ones that we were just mentioned from chapter 1, who the fathers of those who are now living had been afraid of them, and because of that not gone up into the land.
Exactly right. The obstacle of the previous generation is now being mentioned. All right, the Emim people were exactly that sort of people, and they used to live in Seir. They were also regarded as giants. Like, the Hebrew word, by the way, is Rephaim. It doesn't show up in my translation, but it's there. They were also regarded as giants, like the Anakim, but the Moabites called them Emim. And he makes another comment. The Horite people formerly dwelt in Seir, but the descendants of Esau dispossessed them and destroyed them from before them and dwelt in their place, just as Israel did to the land of their possession, which the Lord gave them. This is truly a parenthetical remark, and it seems quite clear made by a later hand, because at this point in the story of Moses, Israel had not yet entered the land and had not yet dispossessed anyone from inside the land. So whoever Israel later dispossesses, it will happen. But let it suffice to say that there were Emim and there were Horites, and those people were numerous and tall and great, like the giants.
And
like
that's the important point here, I think, isn't it? It's like he's making this parenthetical comment in order to emphasize the size.
Yes.
And their likeness to the Anakim,
yes,
who were the ones who, because of them, our
Yes.
fathers didn't go up into the land.
Exactly. So the same kind of people that scared your fathers, says Moses, were already dispossessed and destroyed by our cousins, the Moabites and the sons of Esau. And then he goes on with the story of how they moved on and moved further north into the land of Ammon. And in verse 20, there's another parenthetical remark of a similar nature. That was also regarded, he says, as a land of giants. Giants formerly dwelt there, but the Ammonites called those giants Zamzumim, a people as great, listen to those words, as great and numerous and tall as Anakim. But now he says he doesn't speak of the Ammonites destroying them by their own strength. Rather, he says, but the Lord destroyed them before the Ammonites, and then the Ammonites dispossessed them and dwelt in their place, in the place of the Zamzumim. Just as he had done, just as the Lord had done for the descendants of Esau, by the way. If you thought before that the descendants of Esau destroyed the people, it was the Lord.
So there's really an emphasis here on the Lord's
ability.
And not only that, but on him being not just the God of Israel in the sense of, well, he belongs to Israel. No, Israel belongs to him because he also worked for other people and did things with other people.
Yes, he did. God is not only the God of Israel. You're right. He's the creator God of all peoples, which is an interesting remark to make because all of this is taking us back somewhere. Let me finish the parenthetical remark. Just as he had done for the descendants of Esau in verse 22, who dwelt in Seir, when he destroyed the Horites from before them, they dispossessed them and dwelt in the place of those Horites, even to this day, writes this hand. And then he makes another remark. Also a people called Avim, who dwelt in the villages as far as Gaza. The Kaftorim people, who came from Kaftor, which today we know as Crete, the island of Crete, those people destroyed the Avim and dwelt in their place. So it's quite remarkable. We have 3 verses and then 5 or 6 more that really break into the recounting and the retelling of the journey of Israel through those lands east of the Arava and east of the Jordan. All these verses dedicated and devoted to giants who were dispossessed. And in fact, giants who were dispossessed by God's hand for the sake of other people. When we think of giants, I have to make this remark here. Over the past few years, there has been a book that came out by the now late Dr. Michael Heiser, a book called The Unseen Realm. It has made, I think it has made quite the rounds. Many people have read it. It was quite popular and continues to be. And what he argues there, I hope I do it justice, is that there is a supernatural aspect to the Bible that, for the most part in Christian history, has been suppressed. And he's trying to bring it out to the fore. These passages that we're reading are certainly some of the central verses that he turns to, and others as well. He wants to really emphasize this as a reaction to the suppression that it had before, which perhaps is due, but who are these Anakim? Who are these giants that are so big and terrible? Really, the giants, they go back, as we've mentioned in our previous episode, there are connections between Deuteronomy and Genesis. The end of the Torah reconnects us to the beginning of the Torah. And so giants, we first hear of them in Genesis chapter 6, when the sons of God see the daughters of man, that they are good looking. And they see and they take. Much like Eve saw and took, so also they saw and they took the women and they laid with them and had offspring. And those offspring were called Nephilim, all right, or the fallen ones. And from them were born Anakim, the giants. And some of them were men of great renown and made a name for themselves, and they even lived past the flood, which is surprising and enigmatic, but it happened. They don't come up much after that. It's sort of something that the Bible deals with very summarily in chapter 6. I can make a side comment and say that most other mythologies, Babylonian, Greek, Norse even, really center around those characters, those Nephilim, the gods of heaven who have sex with mortal women and have these half and half children, who are later men of great renown. Hercules being a very famous one.
Yeah.
Zeus was said to have slept with many women. Odin was said to have slept with many women. Was it Marduk of the Babylonian? I can't recall. In any case, that's a side comment. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it should be a little more of a side comment. Let me continue a little bit more. In those mythologies, those angels or mighty ones of the heavens who make love to women are considered gods. In the Bible, they are considered sons of God. And they do so in rebellion, and the flood ensues afterwards. All right? But here we hear of them again at the end of the Torah, and those Anakim, their descendants who were giants, posed an obstacle to Israel's faith. And in fact, the faith of the Exodus generation was broken over these people and their cities.
And I think that's a very important point here, isn't it? It's like they caused fear in the hearts of Israel, ostensibly because of their size.
Yeah.
But there was something about them that was fearful, and that was the big obstacle, together with their cities, which had high walls and were defended, that Israel thought that they couldn't. And now God is saying, look, I can bring those people down. I even brought them down with other peoples.
Yeah.
That's
what Moses is saying exactly. You see, that these other peoples are relatives and cousins. They live where they live because God had dispossessed giants for them. And then we get to the end of chapter 2 has us now move away further north from relatives and cousins to people who are Amorites. These are the very people, the Canaanites, the Amorites, etc., who God had promised Abraham that his descendants would one day dispossess when their iniquity had been fulfilled.
And 2 kings specifically are mentioned.
2 kings. Right? The first is Sihon and the second is Og. All right, so
who were obviously famous because they're mentioned quite a few times later on in the Bible.
Right. So their conquest is mentioned first in the book of Numbers. Here it's being retold. And later on in the Bible, this will be retold over and again as a feat that God has accomplished for Israel. Let me skip over Sihon and jump straight to Og in chapter 3.
And it's interesting about Og, right? Because it kind of ties us back now to the things we were talking about earlier, about the obstacle.
Right.
And the Anakim. The giants.
So let's listen. After they conquered Sihon, who's in northern Jordan of today, they move on into what would be southwestern Syria or the Golan Heights that are part of Israel today. And there they meet Og. And listen to this, verse 3. I'm going to read through 3 to 5. So the Lord God also delivered into our hands Og, king of Bashan, with all his people, and we attacked him until he had no survivors remaining. And we took all his cities at that time. There was not a city which we did not take from them. 60 cities, all the region of Argov, the kingdom of Og in Bashan. Listen to this next comment Moses makes to them. All these cities were fortified with high walls, gates, and bars, beside great many rural towns. These were fortified cities, y'all, says Moses, and we took them because God had delivered them into our hands.
Exactly the description of the cities in Canaan, right? In the land of Israel.
That the spies had seen and melted the hearts of the first generation with. And then he goes on to say in verse 8, not verse
11, right?
11.
He talks about Og, the king himself.
For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnants of the giants. So there were giants in the land in the past, east of the Jordan, but the Ammonites and the Moabites and the descendants of Esau had all dispossessed them in the past, east of the Jordan. Only Og, king of Bashan, remained. Indeed, his bedstead, or his bed, was an iron bed. Now, iron is it's not cheap. Iron is very hard to come by. You save it for tools and for swords. This guy has a bed.
It's both expensive, but it's also
strong. Right. It's not a wooden bed.
And it needed to be, from what it says here.
Well, he made an iron bed, and it's not a small bed. There's another comment here. Is it not still in Rabbah? Rabbah is where Amman, capital of Jordan, is today. Is it not in Rabbah of the people of Ammon? 9 cubits it is in its length, and 4 cubits is its width, according to the standard cubit. A cubit is about half a meter. It's about 1.5 feet. All right, so 9 cubits is about 12 feet?
That is very big.
Yeah.
4 meters, right?
11 or
meters.
12 feet. Yeah, we're talking about 4.5, 5 meters.
That's
like 5 yards long by 2 yards wide.
Seriously bigger than the tallest NBA player, right?
Oh, by far. By far. I mean, we know of king-size beds that are 2 meters by 2 yards by 2 yards. California king is slightly longer, but this is King Og's bed. That's 4 yards long.
So here, what you're saying is like that. Now this in these chapters that we started in chapter 4 with the now, and don't forget. This is part of what God's telling them. Don't forget. Don't forget what I did, and he mentions these kings, Sihon and Og, specifically in their cities as in terms that are exactly like what for the forefathers of these people who he's now talking about, the people of Israel at that time, that was the reason that they didn't want to go up into the land. And here God is saying, remember, I did it. When it came to it, I did it. And Og was even like remembered today for his extreme giantness.
Yeah. So what the first generation only heard about in the report of the giants melted their hearts. But the second generation, they just met those giants and God delivered. If you show up to the fight, God will do the rest. Maybe not in such simplistic terms, but when God promises, he delivers. And there shouldn't be place for fear, rather faith. And what Moses warns them in the following chapter is, do not forget. Why do not forget? Because now you're about to possess the rest. If you've come this far, go further. If you've seen this much, keep it in mind and deliver this memory down to your children and to your children's children.
So in chapter 4, the reason for the don't forget is to take action in the present.
Yeah.
Remember what God did so that you will be able to function even against the enemies and the challenges that are going to face you when you come into the land, when you cross over the Jordan River.
This is a total classic application.
Right.
You have past events, and it has a significance for the present.
And I think that is definitely a lesson that we can all learn from, right? Even though this is specifically talking to the people of Israel, but it's a lesson that all people who are believers and can identify with, because God works according to the way that he works with us today. And I think that's something that we can really take heed of, like that when we look back on things that God has done in our lives. Mm-hmm. God says, remember what I did.
I wonder if often we have trouble with this faith-fear equation simply because God is invisible. His hand is invisible. His presence is elusive. And these giants, I mean, back then, certainly, today we often, our American listeners certainly know this phrase, facing your giants.
Right.
It's a sermon that's been preached many times. Giants or challenges in our life, if we want to apply it in that way, they're just so present and visible, tangible, and troubling. And we have trouble facing our present tangible troubles with an invisible comfort, an invisible rock, an invisible basis to stand on, an invisible person to trust in. And yet this is what he asks us to do. Trust in me.
And we often either fall back to our own resources,
yeah,
or flee.
Flee, yeah.
And it's interesting that chapter 8 then goes on, if we go back to the people of Israel, to tell the people, when you do come into the land, don't forget. Chapter 8 is an amazing chapter. And I think a chapter that really we should all take to heart. But it is now in a different, it's like a looking forward to the time when you will be in the land. Again, Moses is speaking to the people and saying, when you do come into the land, don't forget, remember. But there I think we have another heart of the issue thing, because then it is, don't let your heart grow proud.
Earlier we were speaking in Hebrew, and it's interesting that the term for pride in chapter 8,
it's verse 14, isn't it?
Verse 14 reads this way in the New King James. It says, when your heart is lifted up.
Right.
All right, lifted up is a Hebraic way of speaking. A high heart is a proud heart. But the term here is also the same term used for how tall those giants were.
Mm-hmm.
And so the giants are tall, and they scare you away. They scare the faith away. Don't let your heart grow tall and proud. And don't let God be forgotten from your heart.
And what it's saying in this chapter is, okay, now we go forward and say, when God does bring you victory against those who are high and lifted up, don't start thinking that you are the ones who did that victory. And that is something that's very easy to do. And I think here, I mean, it's especially in that chapter, in verse 18 as well. He says, but you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who is giving you power to make wealth, that he may confirm his covenant, which he swore to your fathers, as it is to this day. And of course, remembering that again is talking in the context to the people of Israel. But again, if we're taking it as a lesson that we can learn from, that when God does give us victory, pride can often come in.
Yeah.
And this is a warning against pride, and to always remember that it wasn't in my strength.
Mm-hmm.
Any victory, any crown, it's his.
These are difficult. It's easier said than done. Easier said than done. But certainly the lesson that Moses leaves to Israel is a good lesson for us today. Both us in Israel, especially for those of us in the faith, in Israel and abroad.
Mm-hmm.
We have not arrived at where we've arrived by our own strength. And if we've made any strides, any achievements, any accomplishments, it is by his deliverance.
Tov, Dan. Look forward to the next conversation.
Yeah, let us not forget, lest we forget to meet up again and record another episode. Remember to tune in next week for the next episode.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.